There is a timeless axiom that is never heeded. History repeats itself because we don't learn from it the first time. It is difficult to tell who first coined the phrase or one of its many variations, but it is nevertheless a truth that people always fail to consider, always repeating past mistakes. America is also now repeating many civilizations' past mistakes, never having learnt history's valuable lessons. In the course of this documentary, you will go on a politically incorrect journey through time, learning what America's past leaders thought of one of the most controversial topics today, race or racism. You will see a history that is known but seldom discussed in polite conversations, honestly showing what many American leaders have long thought and said. More importantly, you will be shown what became of some societies that followed America's current policies, and get to see how certain other people throughout the world live currently. And you'll get a glimpse of what certain areas of America have become today, particularly the cities and border areas, due to the racial changes, though the media are hesitant to discuss such topics. Also, you will see where our society is possibly headed, allowing for alternate scenarios, depending on what action society follows. Some Americans today think that America was always set up as a vast melting pot, that America's past leaders had always promoted multiculturalism and diversity. Attempting to prove this, the words on the Statue of Liberty are sometimes cited by multiculturalists. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Needless to say, the Statue of Liberty is a relatively new creation in America's vast history. It was a gift from France. Added to this, the words from the poem Colossus inside the Statue of Liberty, which were written by Emma Lazarus and which were posted sometime after the Statue of Liberty arrived in the United States, were not representative of America's founders in any way imaginable. And Americans at the time, and even now, certainly didn't want wretched refuse who are homeless by any measure, though it might be argued that some corporations want cheap labor at the expense of America. In an effort to promote diversity, Lazarus's words are sometimes stated along with another statement familiar to most people. This other quote, undoubtedly the most oft-cited passage by people promoting multiculturalism, comes from the Declaration of Independence and was quoted by Martin Luther King Jr. in his "I Had a Dream" speech.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Still, while the Declaration of Independence does say that, to suggest that America's founders truly believed that all men are created equal is overly simplistic. Indeed, the statement merely meant that no white person should be born a knight, lord, or king, that certain white people should not be given special rights not afforded others from birth, as was common in England. At the time of the Declaration of Independence, blacks were used widely as slaves and were not freed by whites until about 9 decades later. As disheartening as it may be for some people to admit, those black slaves only counted for a 3/5 partial vote that was to be used at their slave master's discretion. While whites seem to carry a burden on their shoulders for their forefathers having had slaves, it is also important to keep in mind that blacks at the time also had slaves, just as blacks in Africa today continue to maintain slaves despite human rights advocates. This is not to say that all whites wanted slavery. Many wanted something entirely different, which still differed markedly with equalitarianism. However, in an effort to promote diversity and make it seem as if America's founders somehow believed in the multiculturalism of today, white apologists sometimes quote America's founding fathers and say that they envisioned a diverse America where everyone was afforded equal footing. But what did the founding fathers and many of America's presidents since then truly believe? One of Thomas Jefferson's more popular statements is often cited by multiculturalists. This quote is even shown in many dedications to Jefferson in Washington, D.C. He is quoted as saying, "Nothing is more certainly written in the book of fate than that these people are to be free." However, Jefferson, the man on our nickel and on the $2 bill, did not end his statement there, as is shown on the Jefferson Monument. Indeed, the quote is essentially taking Jefferson's words out of context. He continued and said, "Nor is it less certain that the two races, equally free, cannot live in the same government." While Jefferson had strong feelings about setting blacks free, he also wanted to repatriate blacks to a land of their own, where he felt that they could find true happiness, just as he felt whites too would benefit. Jefferson said that when freed, blacks were to be moved beyond the reach of mixture. Thomas Jefferson, who once had 212 slaves, described his feelings about blacks, and he made it quite clear in no uncertain terms that he believed for the most part that blacks were not to be considered the equals of whites. Comparing them by their faculties of memory, reason, and imagination, it appears to me that in memory they are equal to whites. In reason, however, much inferior, as I think one could scarcely find one capable of tracing and comprehending the investigations of Euclid, and that in imagination they are dull, tasteless, and anomalous. They astonish you with strokes of the most sublime oratory, but never yet could I find that a black had uttered a thought above the level of plain narration. Jefferson's views of non-whites were hardly the exception in American history. Far from it. His views have reflected many white American leaders, both in the past and even today. Before a long, hard view of America today is shown, and what the future may hold, let us review a little more of America's little discussed past, reviewing the racial outlook of some other respected American leaders. President Monroe felt that blacks should be assisted in their honorable goal of self-determination. Monroe obtained land on Africa's west coast for that sole purpose. He had agents sent there to obtain some decent land for blacks to own, and sent free American blacks to assist in the process. The land is today known as Liberia, whose capital, Monrovia, was named after President Monroe. Similar to others, President Lincoln has often been misquoted by multiculturalists. Unfortunately, some historians have twisted history to such a degree that many otherwise educated people incorrectly believe that Lincoln promoted multiculturalism, that he admired diversity, and that he had the Civil War fought due to his strong feelings. To support such beliefs, Lincoln is often quoted by multiculturalists as having said on June the 26th, 1857,
"Just because I do not want a colored woman for a slave, I do not necessarily want her for a wife. I do not need to have her for either. I can just leave her alone. In some respects, she is certainly not my equal. But in her natural right to eat the bread she earns with her own hands without asking leave of somebody else, she is my equal and the equal of all others."